welcome to an all-you-can-hear non-canon file. I am one of your two glorious hosts, Tanner, and with me, I would say as per usual, but it's been several years since we've done an episode just the two of us. I'm joined by Patrick.
Hello, everyone. It's great to kind of get back into just talking wrestling again because I was thinking earlier, what was the last time we got to talk about this in a mutual space other than what that NXT WrestleMania review from 2018 or something.
Yeah, so we did the NXT and WrestleMania review. I believe that was for WrestleMania 34. So yeah, that would have been 2018. And then all of us did the AEW All Out 2021 review.
Mm-hmm.
But God, yeah, that NXT WrestleMania thing may be the only piece of content just me and you have ever been on, just the two of us, if I'm not mistaken.
Maybe so. I know there are a few odd coupling episodes, but that might be the only one up until now, like you said. But I'm glad we have another one because I think this is a great intersection of our mutual interest of wrestling, but also the global interest of the show on anime and talking about the brand new Kinnikuman series.
Yeah, so if you couldn't tell by the title, we're talking about Kinnikuman Perfect Origin Arc. They're calling it Season 1. It's so weird how Netflix kind of rolls out their shows because traditionally in anime, like take Bleach, the Thousand Year Blood War, for instance, they're not referring to each core as a season. They're referred to as cores. I mean, I guess they're interchangeable. But with Kinnikuman, they're like, oh, this is season 1. And season 2, which we did get a season 2 confirmation just a couple of days ago at time of recording. Season 2 / core 2 is coming out in January. So a pretty quick turnaround. It's not like a JoJo's Part 6 situation. So I am glad about that. But yeah, Patrick and I are here. We're going to be talking about some Kinnikuman. Now, this isn't going to be like, I know Colt and Wenzel have taken the show by the horns and they do this super episode by episode or chapter by chapter breakdown. Patrick and I aren't doing that. We're going to be hitting some high notes, but mostly just have a conversation about our favorite stuff from this season of Kinnikuman. I do want to go ahead and get out front and say there will be spoilers ahead. We will be talking, I assume, about who won certain matches. So if you are spoiler adverse, I would peer away. But honestly, if you clicked on this and got this far, you should know that there's spoilers ahead. Because how else do you review a show without delving into a couple of spoilers?
Absolutely, and plus, obviously, we have our own style that we're kind of diverting from here. But I do think you should look at this episode as more of a companion piece or like a post show type of thing. Like this is help you digest of a season's worth of just meaty muscle goodness, and I think that would be a unique offering of what has been done lately. But I did want to say, because this is essentially a sequel series to a franchise that's not really super known in the West. I do think that's an interesting choice to basically have this brand new series just plopped in the middle of Netflix. Here's a brand new show. Hey, we hope you don't get lost.
Yeah, so from what I could gather, the reason this got picked up is it's the 40th anniversary of the original anime, so it's kind of being touted as a 40th anniversary project, which I think is really cool. I am God, I do believe it's airing on Netflix globally, so it's not just on Netflix in the US like some anime is. I believe it's globally on Netflix, if I'm not mistaken. I know Netflix has a couple of shows that have come out this year like that. Despite my love for professional wrestling, I have never really delved into the world of Kinnikuman. I was aware of the significance. Obviously, most famously, I would assume, is Samoa Joe's use of the Kinniku Buster / Muscle Buster as his legit finish. But so I was aware of it just from like the fact that it's like this big wrestling anime manga in Japan. Like you said, Pat, never really came over here. But Pat, did you have any sort of Kinnikuman connection before this got announced? Because this got announced and me and you were both like kind of immediately excited, despite, at least for me, I not really having any real tie to the series prior to this.
Yes, I will say until the last few years, Kinnikuman has sort of been like a series for me. It's like, oh, this is like a well-established series I don't have much connection to, but like it's so well known in like anime spaces, or at least people who are anime spaces who are a little more well traveled. That's like, okay, I want to learn more. But I will say I do have a tiny bit of personal experience. Like I know when I was a little kid, I remember playing with the toys from the original run of Kinnikuman, the anime, because I got brought over to the States in 1985, and like I was born in 1990, so I was like probably like this is 95, and I'm playing with these like 10-year-old little toys, and basically they're like these flesh colored hard rubber toys in the shape of the original cast of Kinnikuman, and then in 2002, 4Kids Entertainment, like the infamous anime dubbing studio, brought over Kinnikuman Nisei, or Kinnikuman the second generation, and dubbed it as Ultimate Muscle. And that was a fairly popular series in like the early 2000s. And I know recently, I think Shout Factory revealed that they had like the complete Ultimate Muscle series remastered with English and Japanese dialogue that's available on Blu-ray now. And I think that it's a really good timing that you have essentially the sequel series to the original series, and now we have this follow-up series to the original series that kind of it doesn't negate the sort of like the adventures of the children of the original run, but it has this continuation that still fills in like a pretty big gap, because the original series ends, there's like nearly 30 years a gap, and then the kids take over with their adventure. So like there's still like plenty of room to play around, and that's why the creators came back to do the perfect origin arc as it is now.
Yeah, because like even in the manga, there was like a several year hiatus between like the end of Kinnikuman and this perfect origin arc. It's interesting though, like it could seem overwhelming that like, oh, it's hard to jump in like with the show with all this history. I thought, now Patrick, I don't know if you watched it since you were more familiar, the episode 0 that they did with this, with I hated the way Netflix titled their episodes, because on Netflix it would say episode 1, but episode 1's title was episode 0, and then it continued the whole season. So like episode 12's title was episode 11. It so fucking aggravated me. But the episode 0 is literally the story of Kinnikuman up until that point. It's like a 30-minute primer of like the whole series. Like shows you how Kinnikuman and Terryman get like involved with each other, because it's all based around them like sparring in like this dojo, and you have like the other cast members like on the outsides, and it's so funny because it's like the anime trope. It's like, well, I was the big bad during this arc, but then Kinnikuman changed my heart, and now I'm one of the good guys. And it just goes through the story of Kinnikuman, and I thought that was a great primer going into this. So I would say now I'm interested to go back and rewatch some of it because I enjoyed this so much. But if you have FOMO or just want to watch something new, you can watch that episode 0 and know enough going on to enjoy this season of anime. Enjoy this season of Kinnikuman. Like, you're not going to be lost at all. In my opinion.
Yeah, because I will say maybe the one thing you might get lost on is like the different like factions of the characters, because like they're all referred to as Chojin when Chojin means superhuman in Japanese. So like like there's like all these different organizations, like all the good guys are kind of grouped under the Idol Chojin or the Justice Chojin, which includes Kinnikuman himself and his friends, Terry Man, Robin Mask, and the rest of their groups. And like you said, like this is such a foundational anime series, because this series, like the original manga, started in 1979. It ran to 1987.
Yeah.
So like so many manga and anime series have been influenced by this. So like that classic shonen trope of like hero fights the bad guy loses, bad guy becomes the friend and ally from the rest of the series on. Like that is like just pretty much the whole first episode. In episode 0 is like all the members of their team were like former bad guys and they got their ass beat, and then like, okay, we like Kinnikuman now, we like being good. So it's just like how they all interact with him, and just like you see just how crazy and spectacle the series has been. Like like when Kinnikuman fought Ramen Man in a ring made of ice, and he fought another guy in a ring made of diamond, and there's like 5 rings stacked on top of each other in a tower, and there's all these like really crazy and ridiculous looking characters.
Oh yeah, and I think this show has the perfect formula, because like, what's everybody's favorite arc in any typical shonen anime? The tournament arc. That's all this show is. This whole show is just tournament arc after tournament arc, and it's so smart. Just how they manage it, and like it's so interesting too, just because it is like, because we have shows now, kind of like a Kengan Ashura or Baki, that are like these high action anime, but it's like always like real fights. And this is, yes, they are framed as real fights, but it's within the realm of professional wrestling, which I think I really, really love. So like you'll have like for an example, in one of the fights, like Budo, Strong the Budo just hits a one-hand brain buster, and like they call it as such, and they call it like a professional wrestling match. And I think that's also why I enjoy it so much. Like, if you're expecting to watch this and get some of the flashy action sequences that especially like a shonen fan going into, like, if you've watched like JJK or One Piece or Demon Slayer, you're not getting any super like flashy $1 million episodes. Like, this is, I would feel comfortable recommending this to, like, as somebody who has never watched anime but is a professional wrestling fan, because I think there's something there that you can enjoy, and it's not a ton of buy-in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like you said, like you're not going to see someone like running 1,000,000 miles per hour, like flash stepping and shooting like energy blasts. It's as fantastical as it is. They're still using very like down to earth, like real life wrestling moves and real life wrestling maneuvers. Like they're doing groundwork, they're doing rope work. Like it's a really interesting marrying of two worlds, because like this series is so deeply inspired by real world wrestling, and it really shows in how they display the moves and how they do in the ring, and explaining what various things mean in the wrestling context, and plus like how this show has gone on to inspire the real world wrestling. Like like you said, Muscle Joe. Excuse me, Samoa Joe uses the Muscle Buster as a legitimate move, and I mean, not every move you see in this show is going to be like possible, but it's really impressive. Like, oh yeah, like I've seen people do that 100 times, and to see it in an anime just feels like, to me, like really satisfying. It's like, and honestly, it like no move lacks that it like lacks impact just because like it's in this animated form. Like it feels like real and it's solid, and you'll be surprised like how violent and devastating the show with like funny cartoon characters can be.
Oh yeah, okay. So that's where I wanted to get at. Like, so you have, so I wasn't aware of the contents of the show. I was under the assumption it was a show more geared towards children. Um, so I wasn't expecting anything like super over the top violent, but like just in the first couple of fights, and we'll talk about some of them here. But like you have like Terry Man getting his chest torn to shreds by by a tire. And then like I mean characters die during these fights. And like they're not like, oh, you died very honorably. And like, so with the perfect Chojin, they have this thing where they lose, they kill themselves. I'm like, it's not, it is over the top in theory, but like it's not as, this show is for children as I thought it would be. Like the first time that happened, where they're like, "Oh, I lost. Oh, I have to die," and you're just like, "Oh, they're not gonna. Oh my god, he killed himself." Like, what the fuck? It was pretty jarring for me, just going like, "Whoa, what?" Yeah,
because I had read a little bit of the Ultimate Muscle manga, and I was like, there was like a surprising amount of like blood and dismemberment, but it's not to the degree of like Mortal Kombat where it's just like here's just like gibs and gore, but it's kind of like someone gets like an arm chopped off, but it's kind of like, imagine like you popping the arm off like an action figure, and so like just a clean like flat cut, but there's like they're gushing blood though, or one of the moves that the Fishman Atlantis uses, like he busts your forehead open, then he chokes your neck so it squirts blood out, and he calls it Mount St. Helens.
Yeah, like it's super intense, and like Pat touched on earlier, a lot of the stuff is grounded in pro wrestling. Like there is stuff that is like, oh, okay. Even like, yes, they are over the top cartoonishly characters. That's what pro wrestling is you're just a very cartoon real person. At least is how I view professional wrestling. But it's so funny how like it's all grounded in realism, and then like, because that's what I thought at first. I was like, oh, this is just a show with a bunch of dudes, and then it cuts, and then it shows Spring Man for the first time, who is, as the name implies, just a spring, and it's just with really
arms and legs.
Yeah, literally a spring with arms and legs. Like you see all these like Kinnikuman, Terry Man, Buffalo Man, all these like, yes, they are cartoonishly big, but like at least they're like, oh, they're humanoids. And then you get Spring Man, who is literally just a spring, and him and Buffalo Man has a finishing move where he just forms around Buffalo Man's arm and becomes essentially a bullet. It's so fucking sick. I do wish a wrestler would figure out how to implement that. I don't know how, but I do think with some workshopping it can be done.
Yeah, I'm sure give a couple guys in the indies enough time, they'll figure something out.
Yeah. Just all right. I need one guy that's 400 pounds. I need one guy that's 130, and I need the 130 guy to just launch off the 400-pound guy and be as fast as a bullet. That'd be extremely sick. Patrick, I want to ask you, like, obviously we're going to talk about the matches here, but I want to ask you as an artiste of many different mediums. I want to I got to know what Chojin had, and you can pick any of them, whether it be the Idol or the Devil Perfect, whatever. Who had your favorite design that we saw this season?
That is a really tough thing to think about, because what I do think is very clever about these characters is like how simple and effective they are.
Yeah,
and And like honestly, like one of my favorites ended up being Atlantis and Marlin Man. They're the two fishmen of the Creatures of the Black Lagoon is one of my favorite classic movie monsters, and you get like that um sort of invoked with Atlantis. He's like this green scaly fish man, and Marlin Man literally is just a big burly blue guy with a marlin fish head. And like I don't know, like as I looked through all the like the cast, and I like Buffalo Man, because he's just this big, massive, brawly guy with devil horns and just like this curly hair. And of the large perfect numbers, I was kind of impressed by Max Radial, the guy with the enormous tires.
Tires, yeah.
Go on his shoulders, like his arms poke through. Like I love how someone you think, oh, that someone I could easily see someone saying, oh, he looks stupid, and then he like rips a guy in half. You're just like, oh shit, like he's badass. And how you see really interesting, clever ways that they use their abilities and designs throughout the show. Like I'm really impressed that the creative team for the series overall, Yude Tamagos was able to, continually make up these like silly but like interesting characters for like nearly are on to 40 years now. And I think there's something about it that evokes a very specific time in wrestling too. Like this feels like the 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 furthest way you can take like a 80s era wrestler.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's evidence too with just like, I mean, Terry Man very obviously modeled after Terry Funk.
Mm-hmm.
You have oh my god, I'm forgetting the one with the scream. The Apache Warrior.
Geronimo.
Yes, Geronimo. Very obviously supposed to be like a Stan Hansen type character. Buffalo Man, very obviously in the same attire as a Bruiser Brody. So like you do have all these characters that do have like real life inspiration to these characters, either in name or in gimmick, because Terry Man's also a little bit like Kerry Von Erich. And things like that. So I enjoy that, and it does feel very grounded or rooted in early 1980s wrestling, which I really do enjoy. And I do go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. No, I would say like it makes sense because like this series started in 1979 and it continued on till the tail end of the 80s. So like they were there for like all the big names and like that time of the sport. So like obviously all these like legends in wrestling are going to be like represented and like pastiched like in the series, and like the only more as the series goes on, and not just including like here's a guy who has, I don't know, he's made of giant yellow bricks and he can transform like a giant Lego man.
Yeah, see, that's what I love too, because like yes, you have like the guys that are obviously rooted in like real life wrestlers, and then you have like a cassette player. And it's like, yep, these all exist in the same world together, and it's okay. Well, I think talking about the cassette player, I wanted to talk on this. Well, I guess we should talk about Terry Man versus Max Radial first.
Mhm.
Just because I really did enjoy how, like, yes, these characters do look ridiculous, but like again, like gimmick wrestlers, they all like they look ridiculous, and it suits their strong suits. So like you look at Max Radio and you're like, oh, he has these big tires. Well, like when he falls, he's essentially a car, and he can always just like pop back on his feet. And he like there's a moment in the match where like Terry Man can't drop him on his head because his tires are too fucking big. And it's just so good. It's like, oh, like Terry Man's literally fighting a truck. It was I like that's when I knew, like, because I won't lie, like up until that, and that comes pretty early on. I think they start the match in either mid episode 2 or maybe the very beginning of episode 3. It's pretty early on. But
Mhm.
leading up to that, I was like, oh my god, like why is it taking so long to get to the matches? Oh, it's because the matches are the whole rest of the season. So if you can make it past like that first episode and a half, 2 episodes, you're golden for the rest of the season. But yeah, it was really cool, and like I knew after watching that, like I was like, oh okay, like if that's the best fight this season, I'm not going to be disappointed because that was like a really good fight.
Mhm. And to your point earlier, like how it feels like there might be a little bit of a setup before we get to like the action, and I do think that's just indicative of like this being an older series. Like it's going to
Yes.
have like sort of like the story structure of an older series. So yeah, it may be a little slow by modern standard, but I feel like
Mhm.
you're still getting like a lot of just like fun, crazy stuff. You just gotta like you know. Just stick with it. I mean, it'll still be like a lot of fun, and like again, like there's at least one, the two moments in each of the major fights. I'm just like, maybe that surprised me. It's like, oh, either just due to like someone using their abilities in a creative way,
Mhm.
or just like, oh, I was like, oh shit, they killed that guy pretty terribly. That's like I was just impressed by the viciousness of like the villains or something.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I did enjoy uh just talking about the fights as a whole. I did enjoy the very like just our adventure esque. I know it's weird comparing an older series to a newer series, but I wasn't familiar with this. But I do love the like a character will do something and then the other character will be like, well, with my, black hole ability, I can go into the fifth dimension and do this. And then a dog is like, but wait, since I'm a dog, I can sniff out. And it's like, but wait, because it's so good. It's like a very rudimentary version of like stand abilities. um, and it's like the characters are playing chess with each other, but it's just so over the fucking top. Oh man, it was very, very good stuff.
And like you said, like because like it has like sort of the tit for tat, like it's that's why it's like it's a quintessential like shonen anime. Because like how many times have you or I or anybody that is a fan of shonen have read a battle where one character gets an upper hand with a crazy move or ability, then the bad guy comes around and is like, oh, if you can do this, I can do that. And then the hero turns the table again. It's just like the constant like turning of the tables and flipping, flopping until someone finally wins. It's like that's classic shonen like fight structure, and
Mhm.
it has its roots with this series. And yeah, like we know shonen fights, they're built on contrivances, they're built on people pulling power out of their ass. Like that's nothing new. But just to see like this is kind of like a reinvigoration of that origin point, like the series says. I think that's like so fun to see, especially like in the context of wrestling, where they're doing like you know wrestling, like physical wrestling moves, but they also have just like a really bizarre extra quirk or power laid on top of, like you said, with Black Coal. He's a he's a guy painted black with red gloves and a hole for a head who can suck up into the dimension. And he's fighting like a man that looks like a Dalmatian who can rearrange the spots on his body to do bullshit that's like, okay.
Yeah. It's really good. But I do, and see that's what I enjoy too, and like especially with this series, like because of the roots it has in professional wrestling, that's what you want from a good wrestling match. Like
Mhm.
you want to see that back and forth and like the one-upsmanship, or like like some of my favorite wrestling matches I think of, like guys spending 5 or 6 minutes on the mat, and like each one of them like slowly taking over the other, and it's back and forth.
Yeah.
And this takes that to its extreme. I have yet to see a wrestler put a tape in themselves and become another wrestler, though I think that would be a fucking phenomenal gimmick. Uh, Somebody just being, well, I guess Charlie Haas kind of did that. You remember on Raw, early 2010s, it might have even been the late 2000s. Charlie Haas every week on Raw. Pat, I don't know if you were watching Raw at this time, but he would come out every week dressed as a different wrestler and would do their moves, and he would always like job.
Yeah, I that was before I started wrestling. I started watching in 2015, but like going back, I have like learned other people, doing kind of like the I'm mocking or mimicking gimmick. It's like I was like, I'm not that stronger, so I'm gonna, replicate the abilities and moves of someone else. Which like that's a good bit because wrestling is about being like a giant character, but just like simple to understand character. You can see what they can do, and it's understanding immediately, and that's a great gimmick. And so like the man that's a giant cassette player who has like a backpack, he puts in a tape and he turns into a different person, uses their powers like that. That's a perfect bit for a character, and plus like it feels very Mega Man in a way, like it's all just from the naming convention of all these like characters and villains. Like it feels like here's a guy has a gimmick and he fights with that gimmick. That's a video game. Another character from the 80s that's very influential. So like there's so much overlap in this series. I think that's just a really amazing thing about it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think it's also too like we see the roots of so many things that we have grown up with in this.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's funny, like this is what started it. Like, I mean, outside of like actual proper professional wrestling, which does predate the show by several decades. I mean, this show does kind of lead, maybe not being an innovator or the first to do it, but definitely being a basis for like the tournament arc, for instance. That's all this show is. This show is built on tournaments. And like you look at, I mean, when I think of some of the best arcs in anime ever, I think of tournament arcs. Like
exactly.
I mean, like that's the basis of a good battle shonen. Like God, I mean, still to this day, like one of my most pivotal memories is watching the Chunin exams on Naruto on Toonami every Saturday night in fucking 2005 2006, and just being hyped out of my fucking mind when Rock Lee gets his fucking shit rocked by Gaara. I'm like, and that does have its thorough line with this. I mean, like, do tournament arcs even become as big as they are without just like the proven success that is Kinnikuman? That is just, again, all tournaments. I mean, you look at Dragon Ball Z. Dragon Ball Z has done, or Dragon Ball in general has done several tournaments.
Yeah. That was a huge portion of Super where it was just one extremely long tournament card.
Yeah, it was just one big tournament. Like, and again, the Cell games. It was just, I mean, it was kind of a tournament in a way, but like the original Dragon Ball series, you have the Tenkaichi and like all that. Like it's actually crazy. Just like all the lines you can see. And even in like more modern shows like God of High School, like that first season's a tournament arc. Mm-hmm. Fucking, I mean, just so many shows draw their lines from that. I always love like going back and watching something that predates like a lot of the stuff I like, but like obviously like again, I knew Kinnikuman had like a big influence specifically in Japan because like you said, it's just not as big here as it is over there. But just going and watching it and then spotting things, be like, this show definitely probably stole this from Kinnikuman. Or like the version of that Kinnikuman does in this show definitely become the basis of something. I'll always find going back and watching something like that to kind of almost be important in a way that seems weird. I know it seems weird to call this big alien pro wrestling show important, but I do think in the context of just like being an anime fan and being a professional wrestling fan, I actually do think it's probably like this big historical piece of media that I think fans of either would enjoy. So I do think it in that way it is important.
Absolutely, because like, yeah, I know not every single sort of like originator or codifier it may be as impressive to a modern eye, but like we wouldn't have these things. We wouldn't have our modern, favorites without it, or even like the steps before the current day stuff. Like like you said, what literally determined art I was thinking of when I, was the tuning select exams in Naruto, and like for a certain generation, you know Naruto is like, oh, that's like the old shonen, that's like the basic version of it. But like, there's a reason why it's so popular, why it has lasted as long as it has, and how it has so many, like, you can see sort of the ancestry lines through all of the media, because like it just shows like how important, like just carrying on this tradition, and like getting an idea, refining it, and passing it on to the next generation is like it's in every sort of like facet of culture and media. And plus, like, when you get right down to it, like the most basic thing that people like about shonen is like watching one cool looking dude fight another cool looking dude, and that's at its essence what this show is about, and what all shonen is about, really. I mean, obviously there are deeper things, but like when you get it to like its most finest point, that's what it is. Like cool guys fighting each other.
Oh yeah, I mean, just look at like the most popular new thing right now, Jujutsu Kaisen, which as we're
Mm-hmm.
recording ends in just a couple of days. It is a show, it is a manga built around just the fights. Like they skip like the in between. They'll just do like 3 or 4 week time skips, and they skip all the quote unquote boring shit, and it's just fights. You watch Jujutsu Kaisen, it's just fights. Especially if you read Jujutsu Kaisen, it's just fights. The whole last arc is just one fight.
Yeah.
like it again, like these shows have built off of and I get, like, obviously that is what shonen is. Like it's pure essence. Shonen is fighting, and shonen is like these grand battles. That's why, so like every shonen you can think of has, if not a tournament arc, there's usually a really big fucking war arc. I'm talking One Piece and Bleach in particular.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, that's what that is what, when you consider the base that at least where shonen started, of who they are trying to appeal to, and it being children to I would say teenage age, like at least in its beginning, is like that core audience. And now, like, talking about how Naruto really, like, I mean, obviously Dragon Ball was huge for like all of us, but like Naruto, coming to the US when I was like 10, like really shaped like my anime fandom for what it is. And it was because of the fights. Like that's what, like, yeah, you stick a 10-year-old in front of a cartoon where that they've never seen, and then these people are bleeding and they're blowing fire out of their mouth. Like, yeah, they're gonna fucking love it. Like that's science.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm just consistently impressed, like how much, like, this how long the legs of this series has, like, because there are definitely big stop gaps between the series, and it's so cool to see that not only could this series be gone for several years and come back, and it still has like all this like momentum and like stamina to go on, because like the Perfect Origin art, just to get back specifically to it, like it's to the date the longest arc in the Kinnikuman series, not including Nisei, the sequel series, but just sort of this original era, so to speak. It's 208 chapters, and that's 22 volumes of manga. Like like you said, if you want just back-to-back tournaments, just back-to-back fighting, you're gonna get it with this, because like, this isn't really like too much of a spoiler. I mean, but I guess we are in a spoiler talk of it. Like, there are 4 major sections to the Perfect Origin arc. So, like, we completed the first portion of the battles with season 1. So I would say ostensibly we have 3 more to look forward to, and just to fill out the rest of this storyline.
Yeah. So yeah, just to put that in perspective, just this one arc is about 55 chapters less than the entirety of Jujutsu Kaisen. Like, it's beefy. It's like Pat said, it's 22 volumes of manga. Yeah, when I saw that, because I'm watching the show and I'm like, I just don't think they're going to be able to wrap this up in 12 episodes. I just don't see it. And then I end up Googling it and I say, oh, the Perfect Origin arc is 200 and so chapters long. I'm like, oh, there's no way they're finishing it. So I was happy to see that season 2 got a very quick confirmation and coming out in January, which again is a pretty quick turnaround. I'm hoping that's I guess it's looking like that's what we'll see, because this premiered in the summer, ending at the tail end of the summer anime season. So I imagine that's what we'll see. We'll see like a season of Kinnikuman, season off, and then it's back. So I expect next year we'll see that season 2 in January, and judging by that pattern, maybe season 3 will premiere in the summer again, and then we'll get the final season, that winter 26 season.
Yeah, if we're able to keep up this pace, which, like, hopefully no one gets crunched to do it, but like,
yeah,
I think I'm very excited to see how the rest of this series plays out, because like they're just because like we're teased with all these characters at the start of the season, and then like guess what? There's even more bad guys at the end of the season, and just like, who the hell are these guys? Because we have the 7 large perfect numbers that are introduced, because like to go back a bit, because we were told of 3 factions of superhumans, of Chojins. We had the idols, which are Kinnikuman and his gang. We have the devil Chojin, which is, despite their name, they are not demonic looking at all. Other than maybe Buffalo Man, who was their former leader.
Yeah.
But he sort of like turns heel again and rejoins the devils. And then you have the perfect Chojin, which was led by Neptune Man, which may be like a Hulk Hogan reference, and just in terms of how he looks. Maybe an Ultimate Warrior too.
Yeah,
but
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. But then the large perfect numbers, they're just like rogue splinter faction of the perfect Chojin, who are just like have like a hard line, like brutal philosophy that just makes them incompatible with the rest of their overall group. So they sort of just strike out on their own, disrupt this treaty signing, and they start raising Cain all over the world, setting up like these rings in each of the hometowns of the main 7 idol Chojin, and you just get like these like big crazy fights, because the idol Chojin, they can't fight because they're still recuperating from the previous battles of the original series, because I read that the time gap between the original series and Perfect Origins 1.5 years in universe time, but it's like decades in real world time. But but who should come out to fight the perfect large numbers is the devil Chojin, and but you realize they're not really on the same wavelength as the idols. Like, they're kind of striking out on their own, and I was definitely surprised to see like, oh, these classic villainous characters, one that sort of like have a hidden virtue, and also take the beatings that they do in the season.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I thought was cool, Pat, especially like in episode 0, they do the thing with like, oh, Buffalo Man was this big bad, and he decided the ways of the devil Chojin were not for him, and he joined us in the idol Chojin, and then it's like he comes out with Spring Man, and everybody's it's also funny because Terry Man versus Max Radial takes place inside the Tokyo Dome, which is a very real venue in Japan. If you're not versed with professional wrestling, it's where New Japan holds Wrestle Kingdom every year, and several other promotions will occasionally run there as well. So it's really funny. Like Buffalo Man comes out with Spring Man, and the whole crowd is just like, Buffalo Man, no, he turned his on the idol Chojin, and it's so truly like in professional wrestling when a wrestler turns heel or even turns babyface and will like turn their back on like their former comrades and join like this new team, either for better or for worse. So I mean, again, it just has that professional wrestling feel to a T, where I would feel comfortable recommending the show to anybody that even didn't like anime but just like professional wrestling. This year is so weird because, like, just for a second, with professional wrestling media, because we have this, and Pat, I don't know if you're familiar with the Queens or the Queen of Villains show that Netflix dropped a couple.
I
weeks
did see
ago.
that. I had not watched that myself, but I did notice that had dropped too.
Yeah, which is like for those that don't know, it's kind of like a biopic about a Joshi wrestler from the late 70s into the 80s. They dumped Matsumoto, and it's just so like it's so niche. I'm like, how did that show even happen? But I watched the first episode. It's extremely good, and everybody I know that's watched it said it's really good. And Netflix even ran. I don't know if you saw this. It's on their YouTube, but Netflix even did a professional wrestling show shot in the style of the show in Korakuen Hall. It's on their YouTube, and it's like it's a real professional wrestling match, but shot,
really? Wow.
Yeah, but like shot like it was. Like they had 4K cameras in the 80s, essentially. Like it's lit the exact same as the show. It's really fucking cool to see. So it's like pro wrestling is kind of having like, and I guess too, I think with WWE kind of becoming like, I don't know what the word is, chic. I don't know, popular again in like the mainstream. Like maybe that's why we're seeing it, and then obviously Raw is going to be airing live on Netflix starting in January, and then on top of that you have the Mr. McMahon doc that just dropped today, which I haven't watched any of it yet, so I don't know how deep they go into it, but it's so weird how like this thing I've been a fan of now for nearly 20 fucking years of my life it's like having its moment in the sun really for the first time since I've been a fan. Like I wasn't a fan during like the Attitude Era or like the Ruthless Aggression stuff in the early 2000s. Like I didn't start watching wrestling until 2008. And I Pat, I don't know if you know this, but 2008 notoriously low point in professional wrestling interest, specifically in the United States.
And WB, like that was like one of their like notorious moments in their history, just in terms of like the stuff they were putting out. So like, yeah, I'm very much aware. And plus, even when I started in 2015 and watching, like, people, they would have it spans, but like I feel like I know more people who have not really an interest in it, have a more of awareness of it, and are intrigued by it. I think just from like Rhea Ripley alone she's like an ambassador to like the regular people, as to like catching their eye in certain ways to like draw them into wrestling. And I think it's cool. And plus we just have like an abundance of wrestling content. And plus the series you said, like Queen of Villains, like that's from this sort of general era of wrestling that also Kinnikuman like it sort of like harkens back to, like the the top cartoonish 80s style, because like some of the most famous characters in wrestling of the era, not just in America, came from Japan, and like they're the king of making characters.
Oh yeah, like I mean, you look at some of like the most like one I always try to draw to just in terms of like look and like just being able is Bull Nakano with the face paint and the hair, and like you see Bull Nakano and you're like, oh yeah, that's a professional wrestler, that's obvious. But you bringing up Rhea Ripley is really funny because she had started popping up. She started popping up on a lot of people's TikToks I knew, like non-wrestling fans. And they would ask me, they'd be like, yo, like Riley asked me, was like, is she in WWE? I was like, yeah. She's like, wow, good for them. I was like, yeah, right. I was like, you would be shocked at how popular she has made the sport. Like, it's so weird. I don't know what COVID did that awakened the need for Americans to want to be dominated by a goth mom, but it's something about COVID just awakened that in like 1/3 of Americans.
Which, like, I'm glad that, because, like, you think of all these different, figures and characters in wrestling that have, like, that draw people in. And I'm like, for a long time, that was John Cena. And, his sort of like, eventually I'm not going to say his star is dimming, but like, obviously he's not that brand new, shiny, character anymore. Like he's planning to retire fairly soon.
Yeah,
But,
he's retiring next year.
Yeah, he's more like in the movies now. I mean, like obviously he's still a very well known person, but like he's not that active wrestler that draws people to it. Like The Rock was that for the time. John Cena was that time. Maybe Roman Reigns to an extent, but I feel like now with Rhea Ripley, she's like in like 2023, 2024. Like she's definitely drawing the eye back to wrestling. I think that's really interesting, and just like the general and general wrestling, awareness.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. It's actually kind of shocking. And like for as much shit as I like to give the Bloodline story, can't deny that it brought a lot of people back into the sport, I guess, because they were like, oh, WWE's doing real television. And I'm like, it may be real television, not real good, but I digress. It's cool that people like the thing that I like, and I have more people in my life I can talk to it about now more than ever. So that's cool. Well, Pat, I think before we go, I think we would be doing a disservice if we didn't at least mention each of our favorite fights. I'll let you go first. What fight stood out to you? What match stood out to you as your favorite from this first season?
I think there are definitely several matches, but I think the ones that kind of drew my eye the most, I mentioned earlier, like there's something really eye-catching to me about Atlantis versus Merlin Man. They have like this fight in the middle of the Thames River in England, and and it's a brutal fight. Like they don't stay on the ring for too long. They're like fighting in the water, like slicing each other up with claws and knives. And I think there's a great character arc in that fight as well, because obviously ostensibly the Devil Chonins are the villains, but over the course of their matches, they show this hidden virtue, or they sort of like, even though they deny that they have any sort of like heart or like honor, it's very clear that they have like this begrudging, change of moral code. And to see like a very real mirror of like with Atlantis being a fish man, Marlin Man being a fish, like they're literally like antipodes of each other. And you see where where Atlantis was and what he is now, because he fought Robin Mast, one of the Idol Chonin years ago, in that same spot. And there's like in good wrestling, there's great callbacks to that original match he had in the original series, and like him adopting a lot of the moves and the characteristics. Because like to me, one of the biggest, simplest pops you can get out of me in wrestling is when someone uses the move of another person, like if a former rival uses the move of the person they once fought as like a big, dramatic moment, that makes me jump out of my seat. Like that, they do that so well in that fight, and I think like that's, to me, like just one of my favorite moments. And like I always go back to their fight, and honestly, to me, it's one of the most tragic, because while obviously Marlin Man is defeated, it claims the life of Atlantis to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I I thought it was cool because Atlantis literally, like you said, literally uses a tower bridge, which is Robin Mask quote unquote finisher to kill Marlin Man, because Marlin Man keeps saying like, "Oh, you lost to Robin Mask," and Atlantis is like, "I'm proud of that fight I had with Robin Mask. Like it's like my crown achievement or whatever. Like I'm very proud about that fight." And he even uses the tower bridge, and again the still shot in the show of and the tower bridge is essentially a torture rack if you're familiar with wrestling. He he's standing like on top of the river, and like Marlin Man is dead, and then you just see the red light of Atlantis's eyes like fade to black essentially as they both collapse. I'm like, that's anime as fuck. I was like, that's such a good visual.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
And that great moment where the one little boy who's like cheering on Atlantis, like that sort of like shows like, okay, like he has a heart, even though he got fucking skewered by the nose of Marlon, but it's like just like the metaphorical heart, like, oh yeah, he's a changed person. No matter what he says, like he's not the man he used to be, and that's just like, to me, it's a great like beginning to end there for the that character, as tragic as it is, but I'm curious, of the different ones you mentioned, I'm very curious of what we say your favorite was.
So I don't get me wrong, I love the Atlantis Marlin Man match. Like I go back and forth between that and what I'm about to talk about, because I do think that match has like the best story. But as far as gimmick goes, and it's probably going to be a boring answer, I have to go with Kinnikuman versus Peekaboo. So when the fight started, so first of all, it takes place in Ryogoku Sumo Hall, which is like one of my favorite arenas in pro wrestling. I love, I'll watch the sumo tournaments from there as well. I love it. So like just to see it in anime, I was like, okay, that's cool. But then like when they first get dropped in their like locations for their matches, like Peekaboo is just like this crying baby. I'm just like, I wonder how they're gonna do this. And like Kinnikuman at first literally just like spends the first part of the match just kicking Peekaboo like in the shin, and you're just like, okay, what's happening? And then Kinnikuman's like, you don't even know how to like check a kick, and then like it eventually is learned that Peekaboo's like power is he has the processing skills of a baby, so he just learns way faster than anybody else. So he essentially learns all of Kinnikuman's moveset and essentially becomes a 1-for-1 copy of Kinnikuman. So the way Kinnikuman has to beat him is by using his more basic moves as in terms of his finishers. And I just really love that. And then again, in true anime fashion, we get the after Kinnikuman defeats Peekaboo, we learn that, Strong the Budo has to reset Peekaboo, because if not, he'll never get any stronger after all his fights, blah, blah, blah. And then Peekaboo's like, even though I lost, I don't want to kill myself. And you're just like, yeah! So, Peekaboo is sort of loosely aligned with the Idol Chojin going into the finale and, going into season 2. So I really like that, because I do like the idea now that there's like essentially within the Idol Chojin, like 4 of them are all just Kinnikuman, like in terms of power. Because like there's like the robot who was modeled after Kinnikuman, who has all of his moves, and now you have Peekaboo who has all of Kinnikuman's moves. It is literally just Kinnikuman but a baby. And then you have actual Kinnikuman. It's really fucking good. But yeah, I really love that, just because I thought the gimmick was so over the top. But I do also have to give a shout out to Strong the Budo doing the Undertaker rest in peace pin to the mountain. That was extremely sick. So yeah, but that had to be my favorite.
I do think it's funny that there is like that Strong the Budo does the Undertaker, like, the pin like reference, but someone else does the the Tombstone pile driver
Yes.
earlier in the series. And but going back to your fight with Peekaboo, like for anybody who may not know or may not remember, like Peekaboo, he looks like this giant muscle-bound baby. He has a bonnet and a rattle, but he has like two hands covered in his face and two hands covering his stomach. He has like a scary face underneath. I thought, like you said, just his gradual transition from like learning all the big moves but can't string them all together because he doesn't know the fundamentals is a great bit. And like, and plus a real throwback to wrestling. And like, also, I think there are probably some wrestlers out there who could probably learn a lesson from this fight with Peekaboo. Not to throw shade at anybody who's currently working, but fundamentals are important. But I think there was one bit in the unintentional in their fight that had me laughing the whole time, like. Because if you know the meme of like the one tooth like Sukuna like meme picture, I was thinking that the whole time because that's what Peekaboo looks like when he's like matured up. He's just like just has this serious face, but like one baby tooth in the middle of his mouth.
Oh yeah, no, and he has like I don't know who his voice actor is off the top of my head, but it's somebody like very familiar. I was going to see if I could find who it was, but it's a very recognizable voice, and it's so funny. Like this baby character is just like has this very deep masculine voice. Also, learning just by clicking on his Kinnikuman fandom page, he's from New Zealand. So I don't know why Peekaboo has to be from New Zealand, but okay.
Yeah, that's a bit. In case anybody doesn't know, like, yeah, even though these are all ostensibly like aliens, but they're all kind of like giant, like weird, like cartoon and action figure characters, but like they all have like real world, like hometowns. Like we said, like Robin Mask is from London, Ramen Man's from China, Terry Man's from Texas. Like they like if you go to their page, it'll have like the country of origin's flag. And to me, that's so funny when there's a guy who's like made of no building blocks, or a guy who has like a zebra print body is from like South Africa or something. Like it's just it's such a silly bit to just tie that to the real aspect, like where it's ridiculous but also like somehow grounded in a way that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of the same thing of like Oda talking about like all the One Piece characters be like, oh, Luffy's Brazilian. Just like, no, he's not. It's like, okay. It's like, oh yeah, Frankie's obviously an American. Okay.
Robin's Russian.
Yeah.
Sanji's French. Like it's like I guess ostensibly that's where they would be from their respective parts in the fictional world. But like,
yeah,
this is real world. Like you said, we're in the Tokyo Dome. We're in Sumo Hall. Like real world.
Yeah, we're in
places.
real Japan. Like Strong the Budo and the Mountain are fighting in a ring that is being held up by chains in the Grand Canyon. Like it's so fucking good. I think they should actually do a wrestling match like that. I think they should. I think we have the technology in 2024 to make that sort of wrestling match happen, where somebody could wrestle in the middle of the Grand Canyon, suspended thousands of feet in the air.
I mean, if I know any indie fed who does crazy, irresponsible things with their matches and wrestling match setup, I think that's not out of the realm of possibility.
I don't
just
think,
like a gorilla match.
Yeah, I don't think that would be the most unsafe thing an indie promotion in 2024 could do. Is all I'm going to say.
Fair enough. Yeah.
But Patrick, any parting words for Kinnikuman and the gang until we see them again in January?
My final thoughts is just like I am very impressed with the series. Like it will be to some maybe a little, not as flashy, but to me, like just the sheer spirit and fundamentals are there, and it's just like a great look back at like the foundation of what Shonen was and what it has come to be, and also something I feel regress for not. For not mentioning, but like like this series started out as an Ultraman parody. Like Kinnikuman was modeled after Ultra 7, and and then like he fought monsters until he figured out he's from an alien planet where they fight and wrestle. So like to me, like that was just something that to me was destined to endear me to this series, and just like between the love of wrestling, between the love of anime, between the love of tokusatsu, like it's a beautiful marriage of so many interests. And I think if you have a toe in any of those things, like wrestling or anime, like you're gonna find something that's familiar and endearing to this. I strongly recommend seeking it out, whichever side of the spectrum of interest that you come from.
Yeah, I know. I completely agree. Like I've already said, I think if you're a fan of any sort of shonen-esque things, or even just a professional wrestling fan, I think you'll enjoy this. It's such an easy watch. Like again, this isn't going to have the flashy animation of like modern One Piece or Jujutsu Kaisen or Demon Slayer, but like as far as like a show you can throw on and just back to back to back 3 episodes and not really have to think too hard about it. It's very much turn on TV, watch big muscly aliens clash, and just turn brain off. Like it's a very good show for that. And I think it works. Because the thing is, you don't have to be familiar with anime tropes to even enjoy the show, which I think is why I would recommend it, especially to pro wrestling fans that aren't anime fans. And if any pro wrestling fan is listening to this and they're like, "Oh, I've never watched an anime," you already watch professional wrestling, which in and of itself is way more of a nerd thing than anime. I just want to put that out there.
And plus, like I think if you are a wrestling fan, you already have. I think to me, you already have like the proclivity to like anime, because some people always say wrestling is live action anime, and plus, like the overlap between wrestling fans and anime fans is already significant.
Huge.
Like, yeah, because like I think if you're in one, you have like a capacity to like the other, and I don't think they're mutually exclusive at all. And this series shows like how far back those two have intersected, and how far it will go in the future.
Oh, exactly. Like, I mean, just I think about Colton Wenzel, who are, anime fans. They're not professional wrestling fans, but all of the wrestling stuff we've ever showed them, they like. And like
wholeheartedly.
Yeah, and they've been to shows. Like they've paid money to go to shows. I mean, I guess they would be wrestling fans. Fuck if I know. But like they'll watch wrestling stuff and like enjoy it. So like there's already so much. Why alienate? If you're not being weird, why alienate? You're already a wrestling fan. Oh, anime's for nerds. Really? What is wrestling for the cool people? I don't know. I don't understand. Well, that's been Patrick and myself's little Kinnikuman discussion. I would like to think we're going to come back and do this for every stage of the Perfect Origin arc. So hopefully we'll have another one of these for you in 7 months or March. So 6 months when season 2 ends. Patrick I mean, I don't have to tell you. You've been on more episodes of this fucking show than I have. But why don't you hit them with some of your plugs?
Yes. Like again, thank you all for listening. It's been a great time to sit and chat with Han and about just this awesome show. But you can follow me wherever John Lost His Name can be found on any social media you're on. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, Threads, Kara. I'm on them all. Just look for John Lost His Name, and I'm right there, and I'm just ready to chat.
Hell yeah. And always, I don't have social media really anymore. So you'll find me here. But also, if you're listening to this, leave a like, a review, subscribe. Go to YouTube and search All You Can Hear, AYCH podcast. Go subscribe to that. We have every episode of the podcast ever on the YouTube channel. They're uploaded day and date now, so go check that out. We have the whole archive up on YouTube. We kind of working on things in the background. Don't want to say too much on the here, especially without Colton Wenzel here. But there's a lot of stuff in the works that we're all, I think, pretty excited about. So yeah, and yeah, all you can hear. Like, subscribe, rate, comment, 5 stars, and go follow Patrick. And you know what? Go follow Colton Wenzel too. You know their Twitter handles. Colt D 99. Is it 00? I couldn't remember if it was Colt Do or 99.
I think he uses both.
Fuck.
We do the easy thing. We have links in the description of this episode.
Yes.
And if you've been listening this long, you know we have links out the ass. So like I said, you can find all the BoyZ on all any manner of social media. So you don't have a way to miss us, because like some of us are somewhere. So you don't have to worry about that. Just type in AYCH podcast in your search engine. They're going to come up whether you like it or not.
Yeah. And that's a fucking promise, buddy. Well, thanks everybody for listening, and we'll see you again soon. Ta-ta.
Take care. So see you soon.